Hi everyone, it's Plastic EP here from Melbourne, Australia. And I've got as very special guest Mitch Weissman, and he's
Weiss-
in LA, aren't you, Mitch? Mitch, you're in
yeah,
LA, aren't you?
I'm actually up in Bellingham, Washington, which is about 2 hours north of Seattle.
Okay, great. I don't know all the places in America. That's why I
Yeah,
have to ask because I get lost.
I get lost in Australia too. It's fun.
Have you been to Australia?
I've been to Australia about 6 or 7 times. My
Gee,
promoter, Aldo Leonard in Melbourne. I don't know if he's still promoting shows, but he brought us over a few times. I've been everywhere from the Gold Coast to Twin Heads to Melbourne to the Fives Club to the SB Hotel about 4 times before they had live music. So I've been in Melbourne, yeah.
They've renovated the Esprit now. It's all
That's
renovated. You wouldn't
Yeah.
recognize it.
Yeah, I'm sure I wouldn't. The fun thing about staying at the SB was you could go down the street to the McDonald's, catch the tram or the trolley, take it to the casino, the Crown Casino, go to the Fives, do the show, go back home the same way, stop into the Service Club for a drink. The only thing that disappointed me was at Luna Park, and I'm not sure if it's still there, but every time we visited over the 3 years, it was right there in front of us and it was never open. I wanted to walk through the clown's mouth, but I never got a chance to.
Hey, that is still there, Mitch. That's a landmark. I'm surprised you know Melbourne better than I know Melbourne. Welcome to Melbourne. You just gave us the best. Hey, Mitch, you just gave Melbourne the best promotion they could ever have in their tourism campaign. Well done, Mitch. Now,
I've had a good time in Melbourne, yeah.
Let's talk about your fabulous time in that hit show on Broadway. How fantastic was that? Beatlemania. I just want to post one photo for a second.
Sure.
And that's Beatlemania there when it was playing, and that was at the Winter Garden. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was an amazing time. The Winter Garden is one of the largest theaters on Broadway. It was, but I think it's between 13 to 1,600 seats. I can't really remember. It was a wide sort of a theater. So when you looked out, it was like a panoramic view of the audience. It was great. We rehearsed there. We rehearsed at SIR Studios, Studio Instrument Rentals in Manhattan for about 9 months before the show opened. It was just a fantastic ride. It stayed there for over a year, where it then moved to the Lunt-Fontanne and eventually to the Palace Theater, where all those great vaudeville shows were for years, and then closed after about almost a 3-year run. But it kept going around the world till 1980 something. So it was there for a long time.
Mitch, can you tell me the name of the guys? Here they are.
Yes, obviously on the left-hand side of the photo is me. The gentleman in the center is Les Fratkin. He was the original George. Behind him is Justin McNeil. He was Ringo. And to the right is Joe Pecorino, who was John Lennon.
Fantastic. And also got to say, this other shot here is so cool of the Sgt. Pepper. Look at that.
Yep. Well, we had a Broadway photographer. They took promo shots for the show by a lady named Martha Swope. At the time, she was one of the premier photographers for all the Broadway shows in Manhattan. She did a series of photos with us at the Winter Garden Theater, and that's just one of them from there. Yeah.
Can I ask you, what a buzz it must have been? The place is packed for a year. You have to go on and perform every day, every night, and be Paul. Was it every evening you played the Beatlemania, one show a night? Is that how it was, or once a week, or how many times?
Normal Broadway schedules were 8 shows a week. So you had one on Monday night, actually everything was closed. All of Broadway is dark. So all the shows are closed. Tuesday, a performance. Wednesday, a matinee performance and a evening show. Thursday was an evening show. Friday was a evening show. Saturday was a matinee and evening show. And Sunday was a matinee and evening show. That should add up to 8 shows a week. I must tell you that the show was rather strenuous on a lot of us. So think of it this way. When you go to see an opera, they don't do 8 operas a week because it's very strenuous. Musicals usually have dialogue, chances to rest, is not filled with songs. Our show is 29 songs continuously for almost 2 hours. And that's a lot of singing for back then, especially for me, the Beatle parts. As I like to tell the story, my voice didn't catch up with my face until about 1978. So I was only performing about 5 to 6 shows a week. And we had another alternate cast. We called them understudies, but everybody was upset with that title. So there was an alternate cast, 2 sets of playbills and 2 casts in any city location.
That's amazing. And I got to say, the creme de la creme came out to see it. Look at this. Let's go through this photo. I love it.
Sure. This was the opening night photo at Studio 54. So you've got, this is an interesting photo. There was a woman in New York named, oh my gosh, Susan Blonde. Susan Blonde was a publicist for CBS, CBS and Columbia Records. She had a lot of talent. She used to take people around New York, pose them in pictures. All the clients for CBS, Ted Nugent, Truman Capote, Michael Jackson, Rick Derringer, all these people in these photos. On this night, she brought, this was the beginning of her starting to go with Andy and Michael Jackson, Andy Warhol and Michael Jackson, out to clubs for literally like a year. They were all over the place, but this was the first night. In the photo is Steven Tyler, who was managed by the show's producers and his managers, Lieber Krebs, Steve Lieber and David Krebs. We were produced by them. I was actually signed to their management company for a deal for a while. This night we're walking in, we take the photos. There's photos of us without those guys. As we're standing there with Steven, Andy comes walking over to me and says, "Hey, Mitch, what's happening?" I said, "Well, Andy, the show just opened." He said, "Really?" Because he was always at Studio 54. You could always find Andy at studio. As a matter of fact, my first contact with him was him calling me on the phone from Studio 54 months earlier. But this night he says, "So the show opened?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Can I be in the picture?" I said, "Sure." And I grabbed him and pulled him into the picture. The next thing I know, this kid walks up and says, "Hi," reaches his hand across Andy to me and says, "Hi, I'm Michael." "Hi, Michael. Happy birthday." And I'm going, "What?" Because how did anybody know it was my birthday? It was actually a few days away from my birthday. But Michael was there because my dad was a labor attorney. One of the lawyers in the office, his brother worked with the Jacksons. And he actually asked my father, "Do you think Mitch would mind if Michael came to the show?" Now, this is when Michael was still with the Jackson 5 and just leaving it. And my dad had no idea who he was talking about. So he said, "Sure, invite anybody you want." And that's how Michael came to the show. But it was before Susan had the great idea to put Andy and Michael out on the town all the time. So that's how that photo came to be. There were many other people there, great musos, what do you call it? Vinny Appice, Myron Grumbacher from Pat Benatar, Danny Johnson, great blues guitarist. The rest of the members of Aerosmith somewhere in there. So yeah, so it was a great evening.
And also, I got to tell you, playing Beatlemania, did you come up from playing in bands? Tell me a bit about that, because you don't go into like Beatlemania without that experience of knowing music as well. So did you come up through like a tribute Beatle band or with bands? How did that happen?
No, I never did do a Beatles tribute band. I was in a local bands on Long Island for a long time. Well, as I said once before, I had a group with Vince Martell from the Vanilla Fudge. We played cover songs and blues stuff. We did. Then I joined this band called Bulldog. Bulldog was the tail end version of the group Bulldog, which had John Turi, who played with Blue Angel and Cyndi Lauper years later. Billy Hawker, great lead vocalist. That original band had Gene Cornish from the Rascals and Dino Danelli in it. By the time we played, there was another drummer named John Perry and just the 4 of us. And Jimmy Crespo from Aerosmith, years later Aerosmith. So Jimmy, we all had this local band. We were playing the clubs on Long Island along with all the big band guys back there, Twisted Sister before they hit it big, all that stuff. We were a pretty big club band. We were booked by a booking agency in the upstate New York. We did a Beatles set where I played piano. We did Drive My Car. We did a few other songs, like 3 or 4 songs segued into each other. And the agent always remembered that. And when that band broke up, he said to me, "You should form a band and do Beatle covers." And I said, "No, I don't really want to do that." I was more like a Paul Rogers singer. I played more like Jimmy Page and guitarist in that sort of ilk, although Jimmy Crespo was the lead guitar player. So I came from a musical background, absolutely. But what happened was the audition came out. And a friend of mine was working at a Sam Ash music store in Hempstead. He saw the ad. This is my friend Andy, who was the bass player in one of those prior bands. And he said, they're looking for Beatle musicians, wanted singers, songwriters, singers, Beatle lookalikes for unique opportunity. I have a friend named Carl Grevenstead, who for years owned Pittsburgh Guitars, which came about after the show. He supplied equipment to the show eventually. But anyway, Carl was at my house and he dragged me to the audition, which was at a small studio in New York called SIR. I was a little nervous, and I sang part of Yesterday, part of Get Back on acoustic guitar. And the audition person was, the casting guy was Kenny Laguna, who for years has been Joan Jett's manager and now is also still her keyboard player. But Kenny saw something in me and was writing furiously as I'm singing, which made me very nervous. But eventually I found out years later, he showed me what he wrote. He kept writing over and over in his notebook, looks exactly like Paul, sounds close. So, so it was pretty funny. So that's how I started. A friend of mine, Ricky Shutter, who was a Broadway musical drummer, took me to the auditions, and he and Jimmy and I had done demos prior to me going to Beatlemania for a record deal. In the studio, I shared the time. Before me was Debbie Harry and Chris Stein with Blondie, and after me was them. So we used to trade back and forth. Of course, Blondie went on to become Blondie, and I went into Beatlemania.
Amazing. But the people that you know, it's like you're there. Like I'm here in Australia, and I can only imagine, right? You got a Broadway show running for a year, and you're like the creme de la creme of the whole.
It ran for more than a year. I did the show for almost 2 years, and left it. Left it, and then came back to do the national tour in 1980. And it was just so much fun. It was fantastic. It was it was a great time that you'd find yourself in a room with all these people and go, what am I doing here? But they were also fans. A lot of the biggest stars in the world were fans. When they asked me for my autograph for their kids, I was like, I go, only if you give me yours. So it was a lot of fun.
Amazing. But you got to have a couple of stories you can share with me over that whole period.
Sure.
In Beatlemania. Can you tell me a few stories?
Well, I know. I mean, like that opening night party night was pretty amazing. I did that show for a number of years. I can't even, it's when you ask me to tell you stories about that, I really don't know how to describe it. The touring was fantastic when we started doing that in 1980. We took the national show on the road to LA for 6 months. After they left the company on Broadway. So we went and opened it in LA. That was a lot of fun. Met all kinds of people out there. With my wife, six months out there. And then my first wife, there have been several. I am now on the final. My love of my life, Jackie Stanton. But there are a lot of stories. I don't know how to describe it to you. I mean, I've met everybody from Chuck Barris from The Gong Show to Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac to Ringo to all kinds of people. I can't even begin to tell you.
Okay, so after Beatlemania, as I said, what did you pursue after that? Were you then doing more theater, or you're going more into musical things?
I did my job well in Beatlemania. I did a British accent and stuff like that, and actually kind of typecast myself. I was prepared for typecasting myself to the point where, just like any television actor, Archie Bunker, anybody who is typecast, people tend to think that's who you are. My music style was anything but pop music. It was still pop oriented, but the thing is, I was, like I said, my original singing voice was more like Paul Rodgers or Lou Gramm or people like that, a rougher singing style. I had to clean my voice up to do the Beatles stuff. So it was actually a great training thing. It's like doing an extended version of musical scales night after night after night, the same song. So you actually get to work your voice around them. And as I said before, my voice caught up with my face sometime in 1978. The only good thing, and this is a funny thing, McCartney had just released with the Beatles the Hollywood Bowl recordings, and that showed for the first time ever, their live voices, the screaming sound, McCartney's loud, screaming, Little Richardish sort of vocals. Then he released Wings Over America, and you have that, yeah, all that sort of stuff that he used to do doing that stuff. Me, coincidentally, by about the fifth or sixth show of the week, I had that voice all the time, like his live performances, which he liked to scream a little bit more. His manager, Brian Brawley, came to see the show in 1977. And his first words to me in the dressing room were, "My God, man, you sound just like him." And I said to him, "Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot." Because I was having vocal issues, but I could still sing the parts on stage. I almost printed up little cards like Tom Jones that went, "Please forgive me. I am Tom Jones, but I can't speak. I'm under doctor's orders." He used to have a lot of vocal issues too, because he was quite a belter when he sang. So when you went out at night, you had to stop. You had to be quiet. So I would ask people, "Please forgive me. I can't speak." So anyway, that was a lot of fun. It was a great time back then. Yeah. So I started out in musical stuff with different bands, and my friend Ricky is the one who dragged me to the auditions, and the rest, as they say, is history. My musical style was more rock oriented. But I did commercials. Like I said, I typecast myself. So I went off on a tangent there. I typecast myself so well that I did English voiceovers for a number of years on commercials and things like that. I ended up really becoming, I guess, legitimate. Actually, all the guys from Beatlemania who left prior to my leaving that show all shopped deals at all the record labels in town. And they all were pop guys. I was the one guy that was from the rock end who did a performance and became McCartney for the role. I remember talking to record company presidents, the president of Chrysalis, and I'd say, "I'd like to give you my demo." He says, "I don't need to hear your demo. I know what you sound like." That's because of my face and my performance. The first thing that really legitimized me around town, aside from sitting in with bands and singing harder songs and stuff like that around the clubs, was my own project. And also, I ended up writing with Kiss for their Animalize album. I have
three
co-writes on that album. I'd have one co-write on Crazy Nights, and I would be in the studio all the time with them. And this is 1980. So I'm still doing Beatles shows like the ones, well, Australia was in the 90s, but I'm still doing Beatles shows and going on weekends and stuff like that. I had a hair that was a mixture of this and actually the longest crazy mullet I ever had in my life. I used to take my hair and stick it down my shirt and put the shirt around that with a little tie. I didn't care about the haircut in Act 2. But I had my hair cut this way, smooth and shorter on the side, so that I could be the Beatle, the early Beatle in the first act, and then the whatever version it was in the second act. So when I was in the Kiss studios with them in rehearsals every day, because I didn't, I'm a musician, I had what job? And I'd saved all my money from Beatlemania too. So as I looked around and chopped demos and things like that, I was in the studio with them in New York, and the people used to say to me, "Why are you here?" Eventually, the people that worked in the studio said, "Why are you here?" And like a movie moment, the song "Get All You Can Take" from Animalize, which I co-wrote, which is very close to a bombastic Led Zeppelin style song, is blasting through the studio doors. And the girl says, "You're here, why?" I said, "You hear that song?" She goes, "Yep, I wrote that song." And they look at the door, and they look at me, and they look at the door, and they look at me, and there you go. So it broke the mold. The word got out that I was writing stuff like that. I got asked to do a lot of different things. Billy Squire was a friend of mine. I auditioned for his band, but we became friends, and somebody else became the bass player. As far as I'm concerned, that was a good trade-off. My friend Ian McDonald, who was in Foreigner, King Crimson before that, we were cordially friends in New York. He asked me to join his band. At the end of it, he turned me down, and he was sure I was going to tell him, "Well, screw you," and I didn't. I said, "So where do you want to go for dinner?" And he's been one of my longest friends. Billy is still my friend. All my friends are people I met business-wise, and when they had to tell me, "I'm sorry, I can't use you," I was fine. So what do you want to do next week? So, and it worked well in my case. I have a lot of good friends.
But these are major rock stars. Can you just tell me a little bit about Kista? To be on the inner sanctum of Kista, come on. You got to give me a story dealing with the guys in the studio, what it was like and how they are. How's Gene and
they were great guys. Paul, and the way I became friends with them was, I became friends with a lot of people because we rehearsed at SIR Studios in Manhattan for about 9 months. There's a Studio A and a Studio B. We had a lockout on one or the other every day for those 9 months. They were rehearsing us, maybe subsequent casts, and other bands would come through to rehearse for their tours. Roberta Flack, Carly Simon. One of the funny stories is, and again, this is how I met Ian, is we're rehearsing at nighttime and in comes Foreigner rehearsing for their first tour, and in 76 or 77, and they walk in, they're watching from the back, and we're not in any costumes, we're just doing the songs. And Lou Graham walks up to me and says, "Don't I know you?" I said, "Yeah, we played a gig together at a club on Long Island, very well-known club called My Father's Place. I was in one band, you were in Black Sheep. I did a 3-song free medley, Wishing Well, Little Bit of Love, and of course, All Right Now." Lou was a huge Paul Rodgers fan, and he remembered me from those days, and he went, "Holy crap," because he came and said to me that night, "Wow, you're like one of the best singers I've ever heard." I said, "Me? Listen to you." So he said, "Holy crap, you're the guy from that Long Island bar." Ian remembered the process. So every band came in. Kiss, this is how this comes in. We were rehearsing for one of the tours in 77. They had a lockout on Studio B for a week. So one day we're rehearsing in the afternoon, and in comes Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. And they have these stools down front for our musical directors and stuff like that who used to leave comments and watch our shows, watch our performances, critique us, and they come walking, "Hi guys." I'm going, "Holy crap, it's hi Gene, hi Paul." They sit down, and there's a list of songs, every Beatles song we knew, including the weird ones. Mary Jane had a isn't it a shame Mary Jane had a pain at the party? All these different songs that we did every outtake you could think of. So they sat down and they said, "Play this one, play this one, play this one." So we must have played 50 songs that day for them. And at the end, it's like, "How is that?" We sang ourselves raw because it was Gene and Paul. Of course, as you know, Gene and Paul are huge Beatle fans. The funny thing about that day was we were singing all those songs, and Peter came in once running in a jogging suit and saying, "Are we rehearsing yet?" They go, "No, Peter, not yet." He'd leave the room, come back an hour later. "How about now?" "No, Peter, not yet." He came in the third time, and when the door opened, without even looking, all of us at once go, "No, Peter, not yet." And he left the room. So for the whole day, there was no Kiss rehearsal. I found out from Big John Hart, one of their main roadies, that they were all wondering, and Ace was wondering, "Where the hell are these guys? I'm here and nobody's rehearsing." So the next day, they asked us to come into the studios, to watch them rehearse. And they start out with a couple of songs. I think one of them was Detroit Rock City. And Gene pops a bass string at about the same moment that Ace's guitar starts smoking and his Marshall head catches on fire. So Big John, and we're there. These guys are just tense as hell. We were escorted out of the room. We went, "Holy crap, that's terrible." And I hope they're not pissed. So 2 days later, I'm in a club in New York called Ashley's, and a woman comes up to me and says, Are you Mitch Weissman from Beatlemania?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "I'm Lydia Chris. I'm Peter's wife." I said, "Hi, Lydia. Very nice to meet you." She says, "I want you to know the boys felt absolutely terrible when you came in to rehearse and their gear screwed up. They've been talking about it for days, that they were so embarrassed that they felt like they were being serenaded and given a private concert by the Beatles, and they wanted to reciprocate and give one for you. And they never got a chance to. They stopped rehearsing and went off on that world tour, whatever they were doing. It wasn't until 1980, I'm at a barbecue. Paul Stanley comes up to me, Pepe Castro, who was in the Blues Magoos, all these other rock and roll people. It was on the roof of his Midtown townhouse. So we're out there, and Paul and I have reconnected, and he gives me his phone number. And he says, "Call me." So we had a great time. The next day when I woke up, I said, "I can't call him." And my then current wife said to me, "Why?" I said, "It's Paul Stanley. I can't call this guy. It's Paul Stanley." So an entire year goes by till the next 4th of July barbecue. And he says to me, "How come you never called me?" I said, "Because I went, you're Paul Stanley." He punches me in the shoulder and he says, "Don't ever do that again. Call me." And we became fast friends for a lot of years. It might have been 81 or 82, because after that we hung out all the time. He and Gene and I together, separately, you name it, we were inseparable. Like all the time we were out, just restaurants at nighttime, stuff like that, or just hanging in their apartments, singing raspberry songs at Paul's apartment, Beau Brummel's. We just had to watch TV, whatever it is, and then we'd go to shows together. So I was there for when I started writing for them back during the Creatures phase, the album before that, but nothing ever made it on the album. And again, what solidified my relationship with them was they're in LA in the studio. They call up on speakerphone so everybody can hear. Ace, Paul, Gene, and Eric. And they say, Mitch, we just want to let you know that we thank you for the songs, the co-writes and stuff like that, but we're not going to use any of the material. And there was silence for a second. And Paul tells me later on, we were so ready for you to be upset that all you did was, you remember what you said? I said, ask Gene. He said, Gene said, yeah. You said, well, that's too bad. Now, where do you want to go to dinner next Tuesday? Because we were friends. And as Paul wrote in an article years later, usually when you write with friends, you don't use their material. They're not your friends anymore. So it took me 2 more albums, but eventually I had 3 songs on Animalize and 1 song on Crazy Nights. And we've still remained friends.
That's a fantastic story. Now, I want to bring back memories. Now we go from the hard rock, we go to this. I'm going to bring back memories. You remember this, don't you?
I certainly do.
Okay. I actually, for homework, I watched it yesterday on YouTube. I loved it. Paul's in the hospital, and it's a great episode.
That was a lot of fun. There was a casting agent at Paramount named Bobby Hoffman. They were doing an episode for Beatlemania called Beatlemania. A variety of LA guys went and auditioned because they were going to have one of the Beatles stuck in a hospital suffering from exhaustion. And Randy Clark, who was the second Lennon on Broadway, he eventually, when that show closed, he was John Lennon, the first John Lennon in the show Legends in Concert that ran for 20 some odd years in Las Vegas, and toured as well. I think Legends actually came to Burswood Casino probably at some point as well. But so did we actually in 1990 something. Randy called me. He was sitting in Bobby's office, and he called the Lieber Krebs office trying to get my phone number. And I actually happened to be standing in the office at the time. And the woman, Carol, who took the phone call, he said, I'm standing with Bobby Hoffman. They want to get a hold of Mitch, and they want to do this episode. They want to do this. And I'm deprecatingly say, well, why don't you just get Tony Kishman, he was also on McCartney. He also still tours now in a live McCartney show called Live and Let Die. Very great performer. But I said, why don't you just use Tony? He's there. I'm not in my mind thinking this is television. They'll fly me anywhere. So eventually, Bobby gets on the phone and says, I don't want anybody. I just want to know about Mitch. I said to her, tell him I'll do it. So that's how I got the role in Joni Loves Chachi. So and they flew me to LA. We did the episode. Scott was actually a great guy back then. So was Aaron, Art Matrano, all the cast. Ellen Travolta was like a big sister. Everybody at Paramount was great, to the point where they actually offered me a production deal, like a contract player deal. One of the last contract player deal. That was the year they were ending them. And I actually had some personal stuff I was dealing with my family, so I had to turn them down. But I did have a great time. And I met Gary Marshall and all the people in the different shows from Happy Days and stuff like that on the lot. I even met Sylvester Stallone, who was doing a war movie. I mean, it was a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
Mitch, I've got to ask you, before we go, I've got to have a Paul McCartney voice. Come on, because I'm here in Melbourne, Australia.
Let's see if I can do this. Hi, everyone. It's Paul McCartney here, speaking to you from Bellingham, Washington. It's a long way off from any place I've ever been, probably in Everett. But no, that's not true. I probably played the stadium in Seattle, just at so many places I can't remember anything. So I'm wishing you well. I'm hoping you have a great time. I can't wait to come back to Melbourne. I've got a very good friend in Melbourne who I'd like to give a shout out to, Fleur Thiemeyer. Fleur is a big costume designer down there. But in the 80s, we met because she was a fantastic band costume designer. Everybody from Olivia Newton-John to White Lion to Kiss to Billy Squier. At the time, she was actually dating. I actually just recently spoke to Fleur. And so I'm hoping she's good. And if you hear this, Fleur, I'm going to tell you to watch this clip.
Can I tell you, Mitch, I was lucky enough to go to the first Australian Kiss concert that was held at Waverley Stadium, and that was a football ground
I actually visited.
out of Melbourne.
I visited it. Aldo took us on a tour. Aldo Leonard took us on a tour of Melbourne once, and we went to the stadium for some reason. It was years later when they did the orchestra tour and the shows from that stadium that I remembered being there, which was great.
Mitch, I can't thank you enough for today. And all I want to say is I'll let you take us out. It's goodbye from Plastic EP and goodbye from
Mitch Weissman, original cast of Beatlemania, and so much more.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you.